Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining the Choice Solutions webinar with Norlum. We'll get started in just a minute, just giving folks a couple more seconds to get dialed in. Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining the Choice Solutions webinar with Norlum. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's 11 o'clock Central on the dot, so I want to just make sure that we have enough time for everybody. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Brian Steinlage with Choice Solutions. Brian?
Hey, thanks, Ellie, and welcome everybody. Good morning. We're excited about the event today, and we appreciate Norlum joining us to be able to share more information out about Cortex's XDR solution. So let's go ahead and get into the deck here, Ellie. So this is a picture of the Choice team. So this is right before the COVID craziness. Last time we were all able to get together from 8 different offices across, I want to say 7 different states. But you see we're all smiling here. This is right after the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. We weren't smiling here this year after we had a different outcome. But just here's a picture of our team across the states. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is our vision and values. Choice was originally founded back in 1985 by Jim Steinlage, and really it was on 2 fundamental principles of one is treating others like you want to be treated, and others means customers, prospects, partners, but even means competitors. And the other one is as far as striving to always do the right thing. And so we're really big on vision and values, really big about doing the right thing, really big about being a high integrity organization. And that was one thing that when we originally got the chance to meet Norlum, they aligned so much with us, meaning that, you know, ultimately it's doing the right thing on behalf of the customer. We get to work with some really exciting technologies, but we are not as far as we're ambassadors for their organizations and their solutions, but we're not going to just rubber stamp it. We want to make sure that it's the right solution for our customers and clients, and Norlum is just the same way. And so we've been very closely aligned with them. Next slide. Where Choice serves. So we have 8 offices across the states here. So in the last 6 years, we've had the pleasure and privilege of serving over 750 customers across 43 different states. And so a lot of these organizations, we're not specifically looking to business up in the on the coast, but a lot of times it's different expertise on the technologies that we get invited into, because they, like I said, because maybe our focus around healthcare or end user computer security technologies, we get the chance to earn some opportunities, be able to serve some of those organizations. Although we're not pursuing them in all these 43 different states, like I said, it's a matter of our expertise gets us brought into those opportunities. So we do have a broad breadth across it, and also too in this global, this kind of virtual state. There's really no matter where you're at, we can be able to help your organization. Next slide. Sorry for the delay here, guys. What we do, so we get a chance to work with next gen technologies, and so like technology acquisition. So we are able to work alongside you and your organization, understand your needs, the drivers, the KPIs, the different things that are you guys are working to accomplish, and then we can bring ideas of hardware or software solutions that might help in that arena. We have kind of made a name around, next generation technologies. We've really not where a bigger, better, and faster doesn't solve a solution. We're always trying to figure out what kind of technology can help you kind of get a quantum leap in technology, help you advance forward, help you solve that business challenge and get out in front of the tech instead of always being behind and being in a reactive state. And that's where we were with Palo Alto clear back in 2012 when they were coming on the market and approaching security in a totally different way. And so it's been a fantastic partnership and relationship that we've had the chance to work with. We also have professional services. So we work alongside you to assess, architect, design, and then also to build and deploy those solutions that we worked with you on. And for some organizations, we're helping them with managed services. They might not have have the staff to be able to maintain that, or they're looking to move more into an operating state and to be able to outsource that. So we come along and try to identify where those gaps are and where they're really good at, and then we can bring our team tools and technologies and wrap a operating model around that. Some of them we're fully their IT staff, some of them we're just helping them augment a space where they may be on a specific security technology, maybe it's on a specific service solution, but maybe that's not where their expertise or where their focus is or where they want to hire. And so we bring our resources to bear and really help them out in that state. Next slide. What sets us apart? You know, in this day and age, speeds and feeds, technology, widgets, gizmos, you know, our team, they really care. And once again, I feel like I'm speaking on behalf of Norlum as well. When we approach business, it's really about doing the right thing on behalf of the customer and understanding what your needs are and trying to help out. Because of that interest, and because of we've had customers that we've had the pleasure of serving for almost 26 years and going on 30 years. And so once again, is that when we're always looking after your interests, we know that if we do the right thing, help you be successful, ultimately we will be successful as well. But our team really does care. We do have top level expertise. We try to be really good at what we're good at. And like today in the conversation, you know, we do have Palo Alto resources internally here. However, we have a partner, Norlum, that has a whole bench of awesome Palo Alto resources. And so that's why we bring them in and help us serve and support our organizations and bring a top level expertise to those clients. Choice and flexibility. We want to make sure that everything that we're recommending today, we can build on tomorrow. And so it's something that you're not going to get 2 years down the road and we're going to come to that fork in the road. Like if we would have done something differently, you'd be able to advance it forward. We always look at security as a dial. It's, you know, it's kind of like you're trying to gradually turn it up. It's not a switch. And so we want to make sure that everything we're doing is in alignment and actually grows you towards a future state where we're minimizing that security exposure. And then continuous value through the life cycle, meaning that, you know, there's a lot of box pushers out there that are just selling hardware and software. We believe that we can bring value alongside those investments with our resources, and also too, just a stable team. We've had some team members being with us for 15, 20 years, and in IT, that's very unique and rare. We know that the stability not only is important for us as a team, but also too, those stability and the resources that are supporting your organization if we had the pleasure to working with you. So I think now I have the opportunity to introduce Bobby Brillhart. Like I said, I've been referencing Norlum. They are top-notch, high integrity, a tremendous organization. And so it's been a pleasure to work with them. Our team is very deep and has a deep level expertise on some virtualization technologies around end user compute. And we do have security expertise, but when it comes to Palo Alto, these guys are the thing. And so, Bobby, thank you guys for joining us today. Thank you for sharing with organizations about when we talk about Cortex, you know, and maybe the differing of other XDR solutions. So thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. First of all, can you guys hear me okay?
Good.
Perfect. I won't spend a terribly long time on introductions, but I will do a bit to introduce myself. One thing is I do want to echo what Brian said just about the partnership between Norlum and Choice. I mean, it was just a really good fit as far as the way we both approach business. Our founder and CEO, funny enough, is named Brian, and him and Brian Steinloggy just align perfectly on that vision. And so it's been nice working with the Choice team because it does just feel like an extension of our own team. Like Brian mentioned, they've got a complementing and different set of expertise, but that kind of familial feel that Choice goes for is really felt on the Norlum side as well. And we've had a lot of mutual success with mutual clients. So we're hoping to make good use of your time today, kind of talking about Cortex XDR and maybe some of the ways it delineates itself from other solutions out there in the field, and just why we believe in it so passionately. So just a few moments on us, just a little bit more as to why we're relevant and why we're kind of passionate about this technology. Norlum is an organization, we've been in business since 2005. Cybersecurity is all we do. We kind of have this ethos of engineering first, engineering last, and what that really means to us is our sales presence is extremely small. We really have an organization filled with a lot of propeller heads, a lot of engineers. So, you know, most of our new business activity is driven through our partners, and it allows us to focus heavily from an investment perspective, a time perspective, on the technologies themselves. And so a big part of what we do, you know, in that sort of alignment with trying to do the right thing We spend a lot of time forward and reverse engineering threats. So from a forward engineering perspective, maybe getting POC codes for a new vulnerability that's been discovered and weaponizing that so we can test it against our security solutions. From a reverse engineer perspective, we do a lot of incident response as part of some of the managed services that we offer. And so, when we see novel pieces of malware, we like to try to contribute where we can to the community and to our partner organizations that we help protect, and reverse that so we can try to learn more about threat actor tactics and techniques and be better prepared the next time we encounter something like that. And so what that allows us to do, though, is really kind of assess what's out there in the marketplace and what we feel like is really delivering, not only on the promises, because a lot of solutions can on paper deliver on a promise, but deliver on the outcome that an organization is looking for as it relates to security. And so we have landed on Palo Alto Networks for that. We have evaluated a myriad of solutions, several of which I'm sure you either are running if you're not running Palo, or that you've considered at some point in time. And so our hope today is to kind of double click on the points that made XDR so special for us, and kind of made that solution that we put out there for security on the endpoint. We have become pretty deeply invested in Palo Alto Networks after making that decision. And so you can see some of the little things that supported us below. So certified professional services provider essentially just says we deliver professional services as good or better than Palo Alto Networks. The managed service partner is pretty self-explanatory. Palo just kind of goes through a vetting process and make sure that you're kind of greenlit or blessed to do that. And then the CyberForce Guardian kind of moniker there, that's a professional services award. Essentially, we've just gotten a lot of positive feedback from professional services engagements. Our organization name is Norlem, of course, and we won't talk much about Aegis, but you'll see it throughout here. Aegis is just the name of our managed service. We're not really here to talk about that, but it just kind of ends up showing up on these. And lastly, my role. My role is Vice President of Engineering, and so I help drive our technical vision and direction, but also I'm responsible for professional service delivery just as a whole. And so, it's my team doing that forward and reverse engineering and delivering the managed services daily, driven and powered by Cortex XDR. As we go through this, I definitely want to try to leave some time on the back end. We typically do longer format, kind of more technical demos, where we might actually go through a threat and kind of look through all of that. That tends to take some time, so we're not necessarily going to do that today. However, if this was a valuable use of your time, you do find the subject matter interesting, please feel free to reach back out to Choice. They're going to be following up after this as well, but please feel free to reach out to them if you want a more one-on-one, more technically focused demo. We can show you threats in our lab if you want to bring some threats to the table, or even if you can't access them, if you're curious about a particular campaign, let us know. We can discuss it. We can lab it. We can do a lot, but we're going to keep it relatively high level and just really try to focus on those delineators today. And like I said, try to leave 5 or 10 minutes at the end for some questions if we've got them. So this is something that I think we're all probably dealing with. I know from the partners that we work with, this is either something folks are currently experiencing or something that we're all very concerned about, and that's ransomware. A lot of that landscape has changed. What used to be pretty sophisticated they're still sophisticated attacks, but pretty directed and targeted attacks have really become commoditized with a lot of these tools out there. And so this is just some summary data that, again, I think just articulates the main point that I think we're all painfully aware of, and that is attacks are becoming more frequent. More sophisticated techniques are being launched in a more commoditized way, which means, what used to be relegated for just the Targets and, Home Depots of the world is now, being thrown at the mom and pops and smaller organizations. So it's a pretty scary situation to be in. And that's what our partners depend on us from is some protection against that. And so Cortex XDR has been great for a number of reasons. A lot of the folks that we initially start working with have this situation here, where they have maybe a really good solution for EDR. Maybe they have a really good solution for UEBA up there, which is user entity and behavioral analytics. So, seeing things like new administrative activity, or seeing things like, hey, this process accessed a file it doesn't usually access, or this user did something they don't usually do. They're typically trying to make and drive some sort of value out of threat intelligence feeds. You see network traffic analysis down there, and some folks have one of these tools, all of these tools, but the struggle has across the board been, in my experience, there's a lot of analysis fatigue. Even with some of these next generation EDR tools, there's a lot of alerts coming in, and it's hard to determine what you need action on right now, what the actual impact is, which of course helps you triage and understand what you need action on right now, and really having enough data to move forward and trying to find a singular view. I really try to stay away from that single pane of glass buzzword, mainly just because I hate buzzwords. But people need kind of an aggregate and more contextualized view of all these data sources, and that's something that Cortex XDR really helped us tackle. And essentially, when we were looking at XDR versus these other solutions, we were really able to kind of hone in on 4 things that we thought really made it better. One, we feel like it has a better approach, and we'll talk about that more in depth. But by approach, we mean some solutions really hang their hats on a lot of cloud analytics and machine learning. Some really hang their hats on a whitelisting, blacklisting approach. Some hang their hats primarily on behavioral analytics, and there's some that offer a mix. But when we were trying to take, kind of a defense in depth approach to the network and endpoints at large, Cortex XDR just had more of those layers for us to work with, and that's important because as we have these more sophisticated attacks being lobbed at us, we need more opportunities to prevent, and we need more opportunities to protect or to detect, and that's what that's really provided us. So it really is those 4 things. So these are kind of the 4 things I want to touch on. The prevention, because it is quite unique in the way that it approaches that. So we'll talk about how we'll kind of break that up into malware, exploits, fileless attacks, the automated detection through the behavioral analytics that it does employ, and machine learning that's on every agent. We'll talk about that, and some of the managed threat hunting options that are available within it for some of those teams, like Brian mentioned earlier, that might be wearing a lot of different hats and might not have necessarily a staff to maintain and keep track of all this data coming in. A lot of the ways it aids instant response. We've got a lot of neat tools to isolate machines, to remote terminal to machines to start incident response, so we can avoid that kind of nightmare scenario where somebody gets compromised and then someone else turns the machine off in an effort to stave off this compromise. It's usually effective with that first goal, but unfortunately it hinders the investigation going forward because there's a lot of valuable evidence, in volatile memory and other places that don't necessarily persist past a reboot. And then what I really wanted to focus on was more granular control that this gives you, and that's huge because, like Brian mentioned, with security being a dial rather than a switch, I actually really like that. Surprisingly enough, I haven't heard that before, but I really like it. I'm going to steal it. But it's really true. It is a dial, and as far as being able to granularly tick that up, Cortex again gives us the most amount of options that we've encountered, and I'm really excited to show you why there. So again, for us, it really came down to a better approach, better prevention, deeper visibility, truly, and more granular control. And so let's do it this way. So yeah, I've got 2 more slides I just want to finish up real quick because they help articulate a point. This is kind of an example of how we use Cortex XDR in our service, and just kind of how it works so well for us. So we're able to detect compromised endpoints because of all the different data points we get to analyze with Cortex and have analyzed for us. And with that, we're provided a lot of tools that we'll look at, but essentially these 3 things become very easy for us, and can be very easy for you too if they're not today. Identifying the exploit, malware, killing process, blocking malicious traffic, that's huge. So one of the things that Cortex does that I love, that is quite a differentiator from other products that we've encountered, is the ability to not only look at the process level information and what's happening in memory or what's happening on disk, but also look at network information that comes from our network security appliances, network information that comes from the sockets on a process even. And what that allows us to do is automatically within Cortex, if we have any sort of event that reaches a criticality that we can define, we can have Cortex actually automatically block network traffic from those locations, domains and IPs. And that's really, really important because in a lot of incident response scenarios that we've been involved in, there may be 6 to 8 command and control channels happening. Maybe only 1 or 2 of them actually delivers malware, and maybe the other 6 or 7 are there for further reconnaissance in the environment, and you don't end up catching them till later down the line. With that capability, the end result ends up being, if we see something happen at the process level first, we can take stock of the network connections that were there when that occurred and block all of those throughout the environment. And so we move from a scenario where perhaps we stopped the ransomware and malware in the past, but didn't quite root out all of the existing kind of persistent connections, and move to a posture where if we can just if they're loud enough, if they drop a piece of malware, if we can catch an activity, we can kill the rest of those connections. And that's been huge. And so we have the ability to see these things and do these things because of the approach that it takes. I talked about that multi-method approach. And so what I want to show you here, and then we're going to jump into the console and look at a few things, is a very high level overview of what's applied when a user or someone tries to run something. So the very first thing that happens is we try to prevent things with Wildfire, which is a threat intelligence tool from Palo Alto Networks. Without going into too much detail there, it's a sandbox environment. And so every single Palo Alto firewall in the world, every single Palo Cloud solution, every single Cortex XDR deployment, every single Palo technology in the world contributes threat intelligence to Wildfire, and then that's shared throughout every other Palo product. So there's 70,000 customers worldwide. And so what the beauty of that is, if there's a piece of malware seen on a firewall in Japan or seen in an AWS tenant in West Virginia, your XDR agents, your endpoints are armed against that piece of malware within 5 minutes. So Palo has a 5-minute global propagation time for threat intelligence, which is just a really fancy way of saying just that. We see a threat somewhere else in the world across one of those 70,000 organizations, and you're armed against it immediately. So as far as, if you're someone who isn't doing a lot with threat intelligence feeds today and want to figure out how you can join this kind of new paradigm we're seeing, which is kind of defend together, that's what everybody's doing and kind of talking about in the industry right now, is, how do we share intelligence? How do we kind of defend together? Wildfire is a fantastic step, and that's automated within Cortex. There's nothing to set up. And so the nice thing is that's the cheapest type of prevention you can get, right? You're preventing from something known. That's something that's pretty common across a lot of solutions, but most of them don't have a repository like Wildfire to look at. If we don't know about it already, then what's going to happen is, or if it's known good in Wildfire, then it's going to run. If we don't know it, if we've never seen it before, then it will be uploaded to Wildfire and it'll be inspected. While that's happening, machine learning that's present on the agent is going to look at whatever we're opening, and it's going to look at it statically and decide whether it thinks that's good or bad based on machine learning models that are applied. And that's driven from data that's gained in Wildfire, because the other part of that threat intelligence piece is it's a sandbox. So all those samples run in it, and so all those metrics are collected and inform those machine learning models on the agent. As long as machine learning doesn't think it's bad, then it's actually allowed to execute. When it executes, and this is something that's interesting, because what we see more and more and more, we talked about, sophisticated attacks becoming commoditized, and especially in a fileless way. What we see more and more is we see less of, malware.exe or ransomware.exe. We see less maliciously compiled binaries, whole pieces of malware just being delivered down. And what we see more often, and likely what some of you have seen in your environments, are we see benign processes like PowerShell, like WinWord, like CMD. We see these things being leveraged in a bad way. They're benign processes that are being coerced into doing bad things. And so even if we pass those previous checks relative to malware, we still wanted to monitor the behavior. And so the behavior that we're monitoring are API calls back to the OS. We're monitoring disk activity. We're monitoring network activity. And all of those things are being baselined across an organization. So Cortex XDR is going to build this baseline in the first 30 days and see what's normal, and it's going to continue to adjust that baseline throughout time to learn your environment. But what it helps us do is identify anomalies that can lead to potential threats. It helps us correlate those and triage those, and it helps us prevent against a lot of those attacks with preventions that can drive from that behavioral threat protection module. And then going back to wildfire, again, if what we saw in the beginning wasn't known to us, we're going to analyze that and get that result. So what's interesting is, even if it was allowed to run, if wildfire comes back after an analysis and says, actually, that was bad, it's going to block it everywhere else in the environment. It's going to let us know about it, and we can even set it to remove it from the machine it was originally on. And while all of this is going on, and this is kind of the big kicker, because this is where position and the environment really, really matters, and this is how we get a lot of this visibility, is Cortex XDR injects itself into process memory for all these running processes on your Windows box, or Linux, or Mac OS. We'll talk about that too, as far as what it covers. But whatever we're protecting, we're injected into those processes, and I need to get some electrons. And we're monitoring all of that API activity, all of that file activity, and all of those network activities. This will be the last of. So one thing that at Norlum, a big part of my role is to take part in a lot of that analysis that we do in comparison against other solutions. And one of the things that I really, really value find value out of are hands-on tests. So there's a lot of different things out there. There's, Gartner, there's Forrester, there's a lot of different groups out there that rate these technologies. Most of them are driven by feature sets requested by the market. I think that's important from a capitalist point of view. It's important if you want to sell a product. But to use a technical term, it doesn't do jack to protect you. The fact that something has device control in it, which Cortex has, but just use that as an example. Just because something has device control in it and the marketplace has responded and said they want device control, doesn't necessarily mean that positively contributes to your security story. And so I think it's really cool framework. MITRE is a private organization that works primarily with the Defense Department, and they've created this, what they call the attack framework. Essentially, it's a framework and database of adversary tactics and techniques. And what it's really, really useful for is exchanging information, identifying attacks and categorizing them, but also exchanging information. We have a lot of instances where we may work with a law enforcement partner like the FBI or Homeland Security, and when you do that, the industry's kind of moved toward talking about these attacks within the reference to MITRE attack framework, because it helps classify the type of attack and then help us quickly come to a conclusion as to what we need to do and how we need to respond. And so one thing that's very, very cool about Cortex is in hands-on assessments against the MITRE attack framework, it has the highest efficacy rate as far as identifying attacks and actually stopping them in a real-world scenario. So when these tests are done from a MITRE perspective, they're done with actual live bits of malware in an environment, and seeing what a given solution is able to detect and what a given solution is able to prevent. So that is going to be the end of our slides. If I can get this to switch over, here we go. So here's where we're going to start kind of painting some color on the things that we talked about in the slide deck, and trying to drive kind of deeper on what delineates Cortex XDR from maybe something else that you've seen out there in the marketplace. So the thing that I like about XDR, that is one of the very first things that you notice that is unique to this solution, and that I haven't found in any other, is the ability to collect information from multiple sources. So a lot of solutions do a great job collecting, network information at the process level, connecting a lot of good endpoint data together, logs from the endpoint. They're really good at that thing. What there's a real big weakness in is taking a more holistic approach. And unfortunately, given the state of the threat landscape, like we talked about, we have to take that. It's not just sales buzzwords. We have to take that more holistic approach. And so what that means is we need to ingest firewall data. We need to ingest data from our identity and access management solutions. We need to ingest data from our endpoints, and we need a way to look at these in an aggregate and singular way. And what's been really, really helpful about Cortex is not only what it ingests, which we'll cover. So it obviously it ingests data from the endpoints that it's deployed to, but it also ingests data from your firewalls. If you have Palo Alto Networks firewalls, if you have Cisco firewalls, if you have Fortinet firewalls, even if you don't have one of those major players, there's actually ways that we can get just raw syslog data into this thing and do some work with it from a network appliance. It's certainly not a replacement for a SIM or anything like that, but definitely from a visibility and security point of view, it's very good at aggregating that data and driving security outcomes. In addition to those sources, what it also has, sorry, I've got to move around the meeting controls a little bit. What it also has are some of these SaaS integrations here, which I don't have set up here because I'm lame, but I think you can take a leap of imagination here. If you're looking at something like Okta for identity access and strong identity, we can integrate with that. So what's that mean? It means we're going to take those logs. We're going to look for things like impossible traveler. We're going to look for failed logins. We're going to look for all those things that you would normally be concerned with relative to identity, but we're going to marry those to all this other security information we're getting. And I can, at least in 2 different instances I can think of right off the top of my head, within the last 2 months, this has been the difference between having ransomware deployed to a large public network, and kind of the state and local government space, or not. The ability to see these things early on because of this. So, currently today they support Okta and Ping for those things. More of these are coming. This is growing constantly. Azure AD, we get to drive the same things from GCP, AWS. So you kind of start to see what that looks like. And all of that ends up getting married to create what we see in the dashboard here as incidents. And so what I really, really like is this idea of an incident. This is what's really unique. And an incident is created from multiple alerts from disparate sources. And all those alerts have been correlated by Cortex XDR to be grouped by alerts that are related. I apologize. So it takes these alerts, correlates them, understands which ones should be together, and places them together so we have a kind of singular view of that. And so we can see our top 10 incidents here. We can see kind of an alert breakdown. We can see this first one's made up of 40 high severity alerts and 74 medium severity alerts. When we dive into these, we actually get to see the alert sources. We can see this one's just 6 high severity. And so if we take a look at some of these, we can just dive directly into our highs here. And some of these other things are self-explanatory, I think. Top 10 hosts, who we have the most alerts and things for. It does have a kind of case management element built into it. So you can see, how long something has been opened and not resolved. And you'll see that here in the incidents, who it's assigned to. So if we just look at high severity incidents, I have one picked out here that I wanted to look at. So if we open one of these incidents, this is what it looks like. Essentially, this is what we're presented with. And so what we see here is key artifacts. Key artifacts are going to be everything that was involved in these incidents from a process and file perspective. Key assets are going to be all the user identities and machines that were involved. And then at the bottom here are all the disparate alerts. So every single one of these is an alert from, in a lot of cases, a different technology. And you can see the different alert sources here. And so what's nice about this is it's taken all of these and married them together so that I understand that, this firewall alert over here is not, actually has a story behind it. And I don't know, since I'm not familiar with everybody on the call, I don't know where you're at necessarily with taking action on firewall logs, but I can say my overwhelming experience has been, if they're using Palo Alto Networks firewalls, if they're using Fortinet firewalls, Cisco, whatever, For the most part, if it's a high severity threat, as long as the firewall is blocking it, most people don't have the time to care past that. It's not that they don't want to or they're being derelict in any way. They just don't have the time to chase that down and block the firewall. That's great. The only problem with that is on multiple occasions have we seen that be the first indicator that something was compromised in the environment, because we weren't able to, or the organization that we're dealing with wasn't ever able to ask or answer the question, okay, so we blocked a high severity threat on our firewall, but why did that traffic occur? And I'm not talking about just the inbound traffic that you see banging at your door all day long. A lot of that's not necessarily the threat. A lot of it is the outbound traffic that we end up blocking, because you have to ask yourself ultimately, why was that traffic log made? And so what's great about Cortex XDR is, again, it works with others. It's not just Palo Alto Networks, that's just the firewall that we have in this case. What's great about this is that we can get that answer. We can find out what precipitated that, what caused that, and we can see just chronologically here in the order of alerts that it was obviously these alerts above here, and it'll help us build a timeline past that. So let's look at that actually. One other thing to note that I think is really, really cool is the access to threat intelligence here. So one of the things that we get out of this is we can connect it to VirusTotal. As long as your organization is small enough, you could probably even use a free VirusTotal key. We actually have several customers doing that actually. And even if you're larger, the only thing that's going to happen is it's just going to stop submitting things after a point in time. But what's nice is you can see right here in the dashboard what maybe VirusTotal thinks of it. So we can see for this first thing that's picked up here, see there's 66 out of 70 vendors on BT that think that's bad. In addition, we also have threat intelligence available from Palo Alto Networks. So a lot of that threat intelligence I was mentioning earlier that comes from Wildfire is seen here. And that just comes in the form of these tags, which provide kind of some additional information. So in this case, we can see that this is actually a crypto miner. And in this case, it looks like it's part of the photo miner kind of variant or family. And that doesn't necessarily attribute it to a particular actor, but what it does attribute it to is a particular family, a particular strain. So if it's not being launched by the folks that initially developed PhotoMiner, it's certainly based off of their code, and that's certainly important and can become very important if you do find yourself in a position where you have to work with law enforcement partners. Those things help them out quite a bit to see that sort of thing. We can also see some that are just related to techniques that were observed, like process injection, and kind of explains to us, what that is. We also see that this one actually turned out to be a Ryuk sample. So that is certainly a very prevalent ransomware family that we see in a lot of different places, a lot of different verticals. And of course, very true to form for Ryuk, we see that deleting volume snapshots is a technique that was observed in this case. Modifying the Windows firewall, you can see it just paints a lot of color. And so from a differentiation point of view, a lot of the solutions out there today do provide some very similar threat intelligence. But what we and I really like about Cortex is the source and size of that data set, because not only do we have access to all the data from all those 70,000 organizations, but we also have data from something called the Cyber Threat Alliance. So we're getting a lot of threat intelligence information from folks outside of Palo Alto Networks too. So there's agreements in place with Cisco Talos and all these other threat feeds to help feed this thing. There's some reciprocation there. So when we start looking at what some of these differentiators buy us, namely that position that it has very low level in the architecture, injecting into those processes and monitoring that low level activity, the visibility that gets us is kind of shown here when it builds this causality chain. And what we did is we just clicked on the very first one we saw here. Truth be told, we can right click on any of these and analyze them and get this same result. It's just going to dictate where our little start point is. And so what's really neat here is we have this entire map that's basically showing us how all of these alerts are related. So we know just by virtue of them being in this pane together and associated with all these other artifacts and assets that they're related. but it's still hard to understand how until you can visualize it. And Cortex is by far not the only solution drawing a nice, pretty graph like this, but it is the only solution giving some of these results from the graph. So real quick, right off the bat, one thing that's a differentiator is a lot of solutions do inject into processes so that, if we click on something like WinWord, so that they can collect a lot of the same information that Cortex has relative to file activity. We're going to see all the file activity that was taken on by WinWord, all the network activity, process activity, module, which is just DLL loads. So a lot of solutions can do that. What's unique about Cortex XDR, though, is it has what we call thread level visibility. And I don't know that Palo actually uses that term. They may have another way. To be honest, I don't really hear them talk about that in the field much, but they should, because it's a huge differentiator, and one that NorLM identified very early on, because it buys you a lot to be able to see things in a process at an individual thread level, a lot from a security point of view. And so when I say thread, for those that might not be intimately familiar with process architecture, and you don't need to be to appreciate this, I don't think, but a process runs multiple threads, and threads typically they do one thing at a time. And so computers do a really good job of kind of tricking us that they can do more things at a time by switching through threads and processes through a process called context switching. And so, theoretically, if you've got a 3 gigahertz processor, you can context switch around 3 billion times in a second. So you can move really, 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 really fast. And it may only move a minute amount every time it touches a thread, but essentially the processor is giving time to all of these threads and this almost giant loop. It's not quite a loop, but they're all getting circled back around to at some point to get time on the processor. And what you get when you can see process level visibility is you understand lateral movement much better. So in this injection tab that we'll look at, the data that is in there is derived from that and helps us understand how something laterally moves and maybe what we can do about it in the future. The other thing that it buys you are things like this. So we see, first of all, that this event happened on a machine with this IP, 10.3.2.69. But what's interesting is it actually lets us know over here that WinWord, which started this entire chain, which is kind of cool. If we go to our firewall alert or something like that, we'll get to learn that actually that firewall alert started with somebody doing something in WinWord. But initially, we get to discover right here, just because of that thread level visibility, that WinWord was initiated actually from somebody on a remote terminal session over here at this IP. And so that's something that, if you were doing an incident response and either you had a team or you brought in a team of responders, if you had enough of the data collected, they would come to that conclusion eventually, I believe. But what's really, really cool is you just came to this conclusion within minutes of analyzing that event. And that really, really matters, especially if you're in the middle of an active breach. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on the file results, simply because there's a lot of feature parity in other solutions out there relative to file. The one thing that Cortex is very, very good at, though, that I don't see in a lot of other solutions is the ability to detect file reads. So everybody's really good at doing file writes. Everybody's really good at determining when something's being exfiltrated as far as a file being accessed by a process with a network connection. They're all usually pretty good about that. What we don't see a lot of, though, are ones that are good at detecting just file reads. And that's very, very important, too, because obviously a lot of information can be exfiltrated without actually transferring that file. And so I think file reads are very important. So that's maybe one thing to mention about file. The places that I think it really, 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 really shines, though, is the network, because it's going to pull in data from the firewall and combine that with data from the process. The injection results that we get, most solutions can't see this at all. Or if they do, they have a very limited view into it. With Cortex, since we do have visibility on the threads, we actually get to see, and this is important, we get to see the actual Windows API that was used, or if it's a Linux box and we're dealing with shared objects and things like that, then we'll have the equivalent there. But in this case, it was Windows. And so we can see the actual API. And why that matters is because, as we talk about that dial and more granular control, out of the box, Cortex has policy. Every single thing we're seeing here But what we can do is, as the solution matures, and matures in your environment, I should say, is we can start to adjust that dial and add these different capabilities. And we can do that based on the API. Man, I'm looking at the time, and this time just went away so fast. So let me show a few more things, and then if we need to do a tighter call with some of you, we certainly can. One of the other things I really, really like, though, is this vulnerability assessment. You know, it has access to all of the data that's on, or all the applications that are on these machines. And so by virtue of that, and a connection back to the NIST database, we can determine when we have CVEs or common vulnerabilities and exposures present on machines. So you can view quickly all the CVEs that are present for all of the machines that have Cortex installed on them. You can look at that on a CVE basis and say view affected endpoint. You can look at your hosts and just look at how they stack up. And so you can see this is a small lab environment. We've got 3 machines that have nothing, but we've got these 2 machines that have, you know, quite a few vulnerabilities on them. And so we can look at each one of these and see, you know, what that vulnerability is actually doing. All of this is exportable. And so you can kind of use this as a really good view into where those vulnerabilities are at. And then lastly, you can view it by apps if you want. And I think that is huge from a threat hunting perspective, and something that we're not seeing in a lot of these other solutions either. One other quick thing that I'll cover, and then I'll turn it back over, is the ability to, let's see if we can do it out of this guy here. So this asset view not only shows me all the other incidents that a particular machine is involved in, but say I had an incident occur at a given time, and I want to see if there's any persistence, I can tell it to go look at all of the auto runs that have been set up on the machine, and I can look for new ones. I can filter that by things that are processes that are services and set to start at boot, by things that are set in registry keys to launch at login, for things that are scheduled tasks. I can look at all of these different things and kind of filter and try to find those bits of persistence that may be left there in a registry key or a startup folder or something like that. So since we are getting pretty close on time, I'm going to turn it back over to Brian. I would, like I said, I would encourage you to reach out to Choice if you're interested in something that's a little bit longer format. I apologize, it's a little hard to fit into some of these times, and I wanted to leave a bit more time for Q&A. I just got really involved in the product here.
No, absolutely. And Bobby, thank you so much for sharing out with the group. We are over time here, so we do apologize about that. But like Bobby shared, we welcome a chance to have a deeper conversation. For some of you customers, we greatly appreciate the partnership and look forward to expanding that discussion. For some of you that you haven't engaged with our organizations before, we just welcome to have a dialogue, and we'll share with you what the solution could do, how it might be able to help, maybe how you can evaluate some different options as you look to move forward here. So the Choice team members will be reaching back out to you and looking to coordinate if there's any follow-up questions, and or if we could schedule a follow-up time. But we do greatly appreciate the opportunity and the partnership. And like I said, thank you for Norlam joining us today and sharing more about the Cortex XDR solution. Choice believes so much in it. This is what we run our organization on top of Norlam's Aegis solution, and also too, this is what our managed service runs on top of. And so it's something that, you know, this is we drink our own champagne in the partnership with Norlam, and that's how much we believe in it. So we look forward to the conversation. So with that, hope everybody has a great day, and thank you again for joining us. Best to you.